her away.
Okay, I'll start. On page 81, he was talking about his dream that he had about the Vietnam soldier and how they were like fighting, and then it was really descriptive, and he was like, I could feel my blood draining, mixing with the warmth around it, robbing me of energy, of life. And then he said he stabbed him in the Adam's apple and felt the hard resistance like a carrot. I read that and I just shivered because it was incredible.
I feel like the descriptive parts like really make it more realistic and like more interesting to read and stuff.
Like a normal person probably wouldn't have a dream like that. Like that only war really causes that to happen.
Yeah, and then he later said, this dream is not about Vietnam, it's about what got me to Vietnam. I've been fighting that gook, the enemy inside me, in one form or another for most of my life. It represents the parts of me I despise.
On page like 83 and 84, he talks about like all the drugs he ended up doing and like the parties he went to and stuff. And like I just kind of thought it was like different for like a soldier, because like when you think of them, you don't really think of them doing that stuff. You think of
Okay, bringing up the like drugs and the partying, people don't really see soldiers like that, but that was like the time era. It was like towards the end of the war. It was the start of the 70s, and that's when like disco started happening. There was like lots of drugs going down there, so I think it just has to do with the time era and everything with all the drugs.
And that was probably their way with coping with all that was going on in the wars, drugs and partying.
I was just gonna say, like, when you guys talked about people using drugs, and it like came as a surprise to everyone. And again, I'm gonna bring in the other book that I'm reading because it has a lot of connections. Mostly it talks about like even when they were in combat, they were always high. Like the people that I'm reading about, and they talk about like it makes it easier when you're running in if you don't really know what you're doing. So I don't know. I just made that connection in my head when you guys were talking.
Yeah, remember one of the things I asked you to look for were problems and solutions, and on 83 that he clearly says that. He says, to feel more alive and simultaneously avoid the pain of confronting the darkness and dark deeds I now carried with me, I came up with a creative and individual solution. I got into drugs, drinking, and sex.
Yeah, and they say like it was in such high supply down there, you could just walk into like a South Vietnamese village and just take some. Like they would have heroin, they would have weed, they had everything. And so when the soldiers would come in, they would just like take it and get high, and then they would go fight. And it would make it easier when you see blurs. They're not people anymore. You could just shoot at whatever you wanted.
Yeah, it was like pretty much like that in America too.
Yeah.
If you think about it. Like, watch like this like film on like Vietnam, and it talks about how like all the partying, even when people got brought back home, they were still in like their habits of like getting high and partying.
Mm-hmm.
On the topic of problems and solutions, I feel like a major problem, and it's like a recurring theme across this entire novel. I think like soldiers like Carl in the Vietnam War, or any war as a matter of fact, they need like something to turn to, because like it can be hard having like no one there for you sometimes. So like I think the solution to that is they turn to like some spiritual source, like a God, for instance. I feel like that's how they deal with those kinds of issues on the battlefield.
Yeah, and he talks about a spiritual source of like comfort and understanding a lot, especially right in the beginning. Because I don't know, it's almost like he's trying to convince people who are in the military to like turn to religion or a spiritual being to try and help them cope and like giving them advice and stuff. So.
It does bring up like a lot of different religious standpoints, which makes it like easier to relate to, I'm sure, for like many different cultures, because like if you constantly were just bringing up God, it wouldn't like relate to everyone. So like I like that he brings up like different parts of like Hinduism and Buddhism stuff like throughout it, like uses some of their own like examples so that like it's more relatable for everyone. Like that he needed to turn to something.
There's like a lot more gods than I'd like expected. That was a lot. It was like pages upon pages of like religion. I was like, wow.
I think you can kind of make it harder for some of us to understand, but I like it at the same time because like, he like knows that like, by doing that, it will like expand like the understanding of not just a certain group of readers, but like all of his readers in general.
And it also helps with like empathy, like what they struggle with, like not wanting to like brave the blood of their enemies, and yeah. So like having somebody to like guide them helps.
I don't remember what page it was on, but I really liked when he talked about like when he like wanted to put a different end to his story of when he was fighting, was it on the second hill? That he like wanted to change the ending to how like why he like shot all of the people, because it wasn't like necessary. It was that like he wanted like revenge for his friend that had died. And he discusses like how like he just wanted like to make himself feel better, but every time that he would write that, like he knew that it wasn't like what actually happened.
Is that with Canada,
Yeah, I think
the
so.
guy?
Page 99.
Something
Yeah.
that I really liked that I came across was like how he has to take a second to like realize that the opponents also have their reasons for war. Like they have their reasons just like he does, and everyone wants to believe that they're on the good side, but he said it's naive to think that that's accurate. I thought that was really interesting. I'm not sure what page that's on.
Rachel just reminded me of something that I noticed a lot. Wow. When I was reading this book, and like I said, the other one that I'm reading, because they're really similar, is that like the good and the bad is really blurred. Because if you look at it from our point of view, we're forcing all these men to go in, and this is their target, it's like their goal. But then if you look at it from the South Vietnamese, they're just living in their villages. They have the communists who are coming in and, you know, taking control of them, and then they have Americans who are coming in and just tearing down, burning down their villages. And so, like, you can't really have a whole lot of empathy for either side, because otherwise you're disregarding, like, the other lives that are lost. So it's really tough to even, I don't know, think about, like, the good guys versus the bad guys. There really isn't one, except for, I would say, maybe like the North Vietnamese, you know, because they started the whole thing. So, yeah. I was just thinking about that a lot when I was reading.
What Mateo said, like with the revenge thing, I feel like a lot of them like felt like when they killed other like people on the other side, they thought it was like revenge and they were doing a good thing. So I kind of feel like after it, they kind of realized they might have kind of regretted it a little bit.
Yeah, and I feel like that was also like another coping mechanism, like along with all of the other things that he did. Like I feel like to just say that like he did it for his friend, like I feel like that probably made it easier on like himself and his conscience. Yeah, and I feel like when you're in that situation, there's not a whole lot of regret because there's so many other things going on like in your head. And when you get back to, I don't know, like your base, wherever you go, and you have to count up how many of your friends died that day, like there isn't going to be a whole lot of regret. There's going to be a lot of anger, and you're going to justify in your head what you just did. And then when you come home and you start to like add it all up, I can imagine there'd be a lot of regret that wasn't there at all. So yeah, like I can understand that though.
Make sure you guys try to connect some of the text to what you're talking about. It's great to hear your response, but you also need like what's getting you to that response, or what's an example, or just tying it in a little bit closely.
On page like 85, he talks about like his son and like how he stabbed like Ella's face in a picture with a pen, and I kind of feel like that maybe made him regret some of the things he did a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like when his friend Canada died, you don't really have time to mourn the loss of your friend. So you have to like reprogram your brain not to feel anything. So when you do have that time to sit down and think about it, it's like, you know, your emotions will be really amped up.
I was actually really surprised, like on the same page that you're reading, I was reading this earlier because I was going to talk about that. He says like if you don't recognize your shadow sides, and then before he talks about like the dream really represents what he's fighting against like inside of himself. That just surprised me when I was reading because I expected it to be more of a book like this is all the wonderful battles that I fought and like we're the good guys and America's so great, and really it's like this is all the horrible stuff that I've done and I feel so bad, and he has like a monster inside of him that he's fighting. So that surprised me that he was so honest about that. Like I expected a lot different coming from his thoughts.
I expected the same thing. I expected like a lot more of his like past experiences like on the battlefield, like more storytelling than anything, but he goes like really deep into like his thoughts and emotions and what he dealt with more than I ever would have imagined before reading this novel.
And on like page 87, he says, "There's no defeating the shadows. We have to live with it." So I kind of feel like the killings and stuff, like they like are always like in his brain and stuff. Like he's just always thinking about it. His feelings towards it probably just aren't really good.
I think too, tying together what Hope and Carter said when we were talking about shadows, you know, a lot of the things that he does, it is a pretty deep book, and a lot of the things he talks about, you can apply beyond his experiences. You know, I mean, we all live with shadows, you know, and how do you cope with that?
So I was just like looking through my book again, and I really like this part. It's like talking about how the people who believe they're decent and like well put together, they don't really stand up. Like they don't say anything, they don't try to get higher. It's the people who are lying that usually end up in rule. Like the people who just are so cruel that they do anything to get up.
Can
and
you
they want their moral.
can you give us a passage that you're thinking of? Help us out.
Page 118, paragraph 2.
And read.
Okay, it's kind of long, but
It's all right.
why don't decent people stand up and scream? It's because there's nothing in it for them. They're in a system in which they wish to survive. Assume you're a decent soldier like me. You and I are decent, aren't we? You know there's a bunch of lying bastards and other guys who will do anything to get ahead and who aren't decent at all. If you naively turn in only one probable, then you know that under similar circumstances, the other sobs are going to turn in at least 5 of one kind or the other. Well, who's going to end up running the place? A bunch of lying bastards. It's actually your moral duty to keep up. I really like that part.
On page 143, it says, choosing when to surrender and when to stand alone is art. And I feel like that is a very, like, deep thing to say, because it's like what Mrs. Heller said about the shadows, like, that's tying into, like, us, like, not just his story, like, that's, like, an everyday thing, like, you always have a challenge, and you have to choose, like, when you're gonna give up, or when you're gonna do it by yourself and keep pushing through. So I thought that was good that he tied it in to make it more personal for us, too.
One thing that kind of surprised me, it was on page 110, when he was talking about how racism and pseudo-speciation were, like, he said floating around. And then he was talking about how if you were, if someone is of a different color and a vastly different culture, as was the case with the Japanese, it gets a lot easier to pseudo-speciate. And I just thought that was kind of surprising that even on, like, the battlegrounds, there were still, like, racist thoughts and, like, pseudo-speciation going on.
Okay, going back to what like Tasha said about like surrendering or like standing alone, on page 86, he talks about how like soldiers are like seen as heroes. So for someone to like surrender is like very big because they want to be like the heroes, like the good guys, so they don't want to like give up. They want to like keep fighting and like win, not just like opt out kind of a thing. So I think that was a good passage.
I think we should try to move ahead a little bit in our chapters. We've done a lot on 5.
On page 155, it says, a wise man once said to be careful of what you wish for, because you may get it. I wanted to be a hero, and that's like the start of the chapter. And I think that it, like, people want to be a hero, but some of these men, they still wanted to be a hero, but they just got pushed into this war, and it's like, they're not even ready for it, and they weren't even prepared. But they got what they wished for, but it's not necessarily good, so I feel like that's what he's, like, trying to say.